Hello and welcome to a Talmud Israeli production. Today we will review the highlights of this week's course of Daf Yomi, Masechet Eruvin, pages 42 to 48, Membet through Memchet. 42. Hayam mehalech, if you were taking a walk, Beino yodea techum Shabbat, and you do not know where the Sabbath boundary is. Mehalech alpayim pesiot benoniot, you shall walk 2,000 average-sized paces, steps, V'zui techum Shabbat, and that is the Sabbath boundary. As Rashi explains, the premise here is that the average adult, when they take a step, it is 1 amma in length. So since you're allowed to go 2,000 cubits, you're allowed to go 2,000 steps. That and no further. Mem Gimel, 43. The story is told, Maaseh sheba'u miplan deresin. The sages were on a boat, and the boat left the port of Brindisi, Plan deresin, on the coast of Italy. It left on Shabbat. So the question is, for those who were in the port on a boat when Shabbat began, and they had a techum, and now the boat is out to sea and they are beyond the techum, but they are located on a reshut hayachid that is surrounded by mechitzot, namely the sides of the boat, how much are they allowed to walk? Do they have the entire deck of the boat to walk around on Shabbat, or are they confined to a 4-cubit area? Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah halchu at kula. They walked around the entire deck of the boat, thinking that they had that available to them. Whereas Rabbi Yoshua and Rabbi Akiva lo zazu me'arba amot. They did not go beyond 4 cubits. Shiratzu lachmir al atzman, because they wanted to be strict on themselves. Why were the rabbis off the coast of Italy, and when did this happen? The answer is that in the year 95, the Roman Emperor Domitian was involved in stamping out what he thought was heresy. People were converting away from paganism towards Judaism and towards Christianity. And so he imposed very severe penalties on people who apostatized, meaning they converted out of paganism towards an Abrahamic religion. And people who became Jews were in grave danger. So the rabbis went to Italy hoping for an audience with high-ranking Roman officials to try to turn the empire away from its anti-Jewish decrees. In the end, Domitian was assassinated in the year 96, and the policies were basically reversed. So the rabbi's mission was largely for naught. But along the way, many stories are told about these great rabbis being on a boat around the Mediterranean. Mem Daled, 44. The Mishnah tells us, Mishi atza b'reshut, a person who left the techum with permission. V'amru lo kfar na'aseh ma'aseh, but he was told later that the reason why you left the techum, the valid reason, turns out to no longer be necessary. Yesh lo pam malachol ruach. He has 2,000 cubits to go in any direction. The classic example of this is a person who wanted to testify in the Beit Din about Rosh Chodesh. They saw the new moon, and they were traveling more than a kilometer. I would say they were traveling 5-10 kilometers to the High Court to testify. And along the way, once they're well beyond their original Techum Shabbat, they find out from someone, oh, there's no need for your testimony because Rosh Chodesh has already been declared. Well, there's no need for them to go forward. They can't. Can they go back? Well, they can only go 2,000 cubits from the spot where they find out. That's their new Techum. 45. The Gemara tells us that the Jewish army is allowed to go to war on Shabbat when the enemy is invading and looks to kill, when there is mortal combat. However, if the enemy is just looking to pillage and take stubble and straw, teven v'kash, then we do not engage in Sabbath desecration by going out to armed conflict. However, there's an exception to that rule. If the area where the enemy is attacking just for financial gain happens to be a border region of Israel, then we go out to war even on Shabbat. Why? Because the borders must be defended. If the borders are not defended, then the enemy can waltz on in and take over the whole countryside. So there was an incident involving the Philistines, the Plishtim, attacking Ki'ilah, a border town. And David HaMelech inquired from the Urim V'Tumim, from the Kohen Gadol's breastplate, inquiring from God whether or not he should go to war. And Hashem says, go to war, and you'll be successful in routing the Philistines. The Gemara wants to know, why did David ask the Urim V'Tumim? If it was simply a halachic question of Sabbath observance, he should have asked the Beit Din, the halachic court of Shmuel, who was still alive. So it must be rather that was not the issue. Rather, he knew he was allowed to go to war. It was not a halachic question at all. It was simply a question of, will we win? David wanted to know, am I going to be victorious? And the answer was, from Hashem, yes, you will be victorious. Memvav, 46. Amar Shmuel, halacha kedivrei hamekil ba'avil. Shmuel says the law follows the lenient opinion in matters of avelut. So earlier in this daf, the Gemara said the law follows the lenient opinion regarding Eruvin. And another area of halacha where this is true is avelut, mourning. So there's a big question among the poskim as to how far this goes. Does it apply even in contemporary times that if there are two sages in our own generation disagree over a halachic matter concerning avelus, that we necessarily will follow the lenient opinion? Or does this dictum that appears in the Talmud only apply to disputes that already appear in the Talmud itself, namely Amoraic disputes, or maybe even only Tanaitic disputes that appear in the literature of the Mishnah and Braita? It's not entirely clear, but the point is that the law follows the lenient opinion. And why should it follow the lenient opinion? Because we don't want to overburden a person with the halachic minutiae when they're already suffering the loss of a loved one. So we don't want to pile on to their emotional grief with additional halachic burdens. Therefore, we want them to follow the halacha, we want them to follow the law, but we will go accordance with the lenient opinion. Mem Zayin. Ha'ani ma'arev beraglav. A poor person makes an eruv with his feet, with his legs. He can go to the site by the Sabbath boundary and declare that to be his place of residence. Rabbi Meir Omer, ein lo ela ani. Rabbi Meir says only a poor person can use their feet. Rabbi Yehuda Omer echad ani vechad ashir, whereas Rabbi Yehuda says no, even a rich person can use the method of eruv techumin with their feet without food. Lo amru b'barvin b'pat. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, the only reason why the sages enacted making an eruv techumin with bread, with food, is to make it easier for the rich person, that he shouldn't have to walk out to the Sabbath boundary on Friday afternoon and stay there. So being able to use the bread, the food, as an alternative to physical presence was a leniency granted to those who had the food available to them, so they wouldn't have to schlep on Erev Shabbat. 48. Memchet. Arba amot shamru. When we say that a person is stuck because they've gone beyond the tchum and they only have 4 amot available to them, how do we define those 4 amot? How do we measure the 4 amot? Do we measure it in that person's own amah? And an amah is a cubit, which means from the elbow to the edge of the hand. So do we measure according to that person's amah or the amah shel kodesh, the standard amah? And the answer is, it depends. If a person is Og Melech HaBashan, they're Og, the king of Bashan, meaning they're a giant, a 7-footer, then we give that person their own amah. Because if we were to give them the standard one, they wouldn't have enough space to maneuver. And we don't want them to be totally stuck. As opposed to if they're a nanas be'evarav, they have dwarfed limbs, then if a person is an average-sized person, a 6-foot-tall person, but has tiny arms, and you were to give them their own version of the amah, they wouldn't have enough space. So in that case, we give them the amah shel kodesh, the standard measured amah. Everyone have a great week. Gemar chatima tova to one and all.